Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Aladumim in Israel. One of the more consistent ironies of life is the remarkable incongruence between intent and result. While there is no shortage of instances in which the result we get is exactly what we intended, there is no question that there are plenty that go the other way. Usually these sorts of things are fairly trivial, but occasionally they may have massive consequences, either individual or collective. When they happen, we tend to be surprised, either pleasantly or frustratingly. But this itself is surprising. We experience this quirk of reality so often that we should come to expect it. There is, of course, no law of nature that requires results to match intent. The two really have little or nothing to do with each other. The expectation stems from our remarkable ability to control fate to some degree. This almost divine power is unique to human beings, because we are the only creatures we know of that have the intelligence necessary to have an intention to begin with. Although animals certainly seem to have goals and plans in the way they go about doing things, there is no firm proof that they truly possess what we can call a will. They just do things, planned or otherwise, because that is what they are programmed to do. If things work out according to plan, great. If not, it's back to the drawing board with no hard feelings. This is not the case with us. We certainly believe that we can directly affect things around us. And we also believe that we can use our power of will to determine what happens. We know that we are limited in what we can really accomplish, but that doesn't stop us from persevering. We are fully aware that the thought and the planning that go into an endeavor likely have considerable influence on the outcome. We also get it into our heads that what we desire and what we push for is what should happen. In this way, we tend to think of ourselves as modern versions of a god. It is because of this mode of thinking that we believe there should be a correlation between intent and result. If I want it and I put out the effort to make it happen, it should happen. But so often that simply isn't the case. We are not gods, no matter how much we convince ourselves that we are. There is so much that is out of our little hands that it is a wonder that anything we set out to do actually comes to fruition. Take the simple example of going out to purchase something at a store. There are so many things that could go wrong. The car might not start. We might get a flat on the way. The store might not have what we are looking for. We might forget something necessary to make the purchase. Something might go wrong with the payment. And even if all that works out, there is a chance that whatever we get won't match what we expected for some reason. It could taste lousy or break or not fit whatever purpose we had intended. Sometimes these things work out surprisingly for the better. This sort of thing is always a wonderful bonus in life. We set out to do something without any great expectations, and lo and behold, things work out much better than we ever could have hoped for. Why does this happen? Who knows? We tend not to dwell on such things when they work out in our favor. When they don't, we get angry or depressed or frustrated. But when they do, we just take it in stride. These unexpected shortfalls or windfalls are the subject of countless stories. They are what makes life so unpredictable. Even a divinely orchestrated book like the Bible has them. The classic is the story of Cain. He brought his offering fully expecting God to appreciate it, as God did for his brother's offering. But instead it was rejected. Cain, rather than trying a little harder to make it work like an animal might have done, allowed his mind to get taken over by anger and depression. The rest is history, or whatever we choose to call it. Cain's fate for not rolling with those punches was to be forever enshrined as a murderer and a fugitive. He should have realized that things simply don't always go the way that we want them to. This week's Parsha is called Vayeshev, which means, and he dwelled. It is a very biblical opening to a Parsha, and it refers to Jacob finally settling back down in his old homeland of Canaan. He had been gone for 20 odd years. And when he returned in last week's Parsha, it was to a confrontation with his revenge-driven brother Esau, and with trials and tribulations revolving his sons and his daughter, and the death of his beloved wife Rachel in childbirth. By now, his sons are all there, and they are ready to build lives of their own. There are essentially 3 stories in this Parsha, each about equally long. The first involves the entire family, but centers around the relationship between Joseph, the second youngest and the favorite of his father, and his older brothers who resented his favored position in the family hierarchy. Joseph gets things off on the wrong foot by insisting on telling his brothers his very provocative dreams. It is difficult to say what his intent was in doing so, but there is no question that the result was that they hated him all the more for it and were driven to seek his death. This all plays out in this long story. He tells them of his vivid dreams in which he would somehow become more powerful than all of them and rule over them. In the course of things, they kidnap him to put an end to his dreams. Rather than kill him, they cast him into a pit and eventually decide to sell him to a passing caravan. As far as they were concerned, they had rid themselves of him forever. But things would turn out otherwise. Shortly after this, Yehuda, the most influential of the brothers, began dealing with a man in the southern area of the land. He gets married and fathers 3 sons. He marries the oldest off to a girl named Tamar, but Yehuda's son mysteriously dies for some unclear sin. The next is put in his place to marry his sister-in-law, according to custom. He fails to perform his marital responsibilities and is also divinely put to death. The third son is too young, so things are put on hold for a long time. The widow Tamar is stuck in a situation in which she is maritally bound to the third brother, but has no means to move things along. She is stuck in a biblical form of limbo. She then dresses as a prostitute and waits at a crossroads where she knows Yehuda will pass by. He offers her a price for her services and leaves her a pledge in lieu of payment. When it turns out that she had become pregnant from this brief liaison, and that it was through a forbidden sexual encounter, she is brought to judgment before none other than Yehuda. She then produces the very pledge that he gave her, which proved that he was the father of her unborn child. He senses that she was right in what she did, and she is allowed to live. Although her pregnancy came through prostitution and a biblical form of incest, she gives birth to twins who were destined to be crucial in the early foundations of the tribe of Yehuda and the future of the Israelites. No less than King David and the royal line, the bulk of the eventual Jewish people, and the long-awaited Messiah would come from this line. The third story concerns Joseph's situation after getting sold. He becomes a slave in Egypt and gradually finds favor with his master. Unfortunately, he also finds favor with his master's wife, who tries unsuccessfully to seduce him. As a result of his refusals, she accuses him of raping her, and he is thrown in jail. There he listens to the dreams of his 2 jailmates and interprets one in a very favorable manner and the other in a very tragic manner. One who will be restored to his former position in the royal household, while the other will be executed. Joseph asks the one who will be restored to remember him and arrange for him to be released from his unfair imprisonment. As things turn out, both dream interpretations work out to the T, but Joseph's plans don't. The one who got his job back promptly forgets about Joseph, and his fate is left till next week's Parsha. Back to that section about Yehuda and Tamar, we have to ask, what were the various people thinking in the course of this story? Tamar wanted things to move along in her limbo marriage into Yehuda's family. She was bound to his sons, and there was only one left. She didn't want to wait until the third son came of age, because even then, who knew what would happen? So she dressed as a prostitute to seduce Yehuda himself. But what was her goal in this? Was she trying to become pregnant through her father-in-law, a highly prohibited situation by biblical custom? If not, what was she thinking? Then there's Yehuda. What was he up to? He knew that he had left his daughter-in-law and his future line in limbo, but there was nothing he could do about it at the moment. So he hooked up with a prostitute on the side of the road. He was probably thinking that this would lead to nothing and would be forgotten in the course of events. But that wasn't the way things turned out. When all the dust settled, he had become aware that Tamar had pulled the wool over his eyes and had become the mother to his descendants through his own frolicking with a prostitute. He realized that he was just as guilty as she was, even if he had no intent to commit incest, and she did. What did they both think when things finally played out the way they did? Yehuda had his children or his grandchildren. Tamar had played her part in producing them, but both knew that this was not the way things were supposed to take place. Was the future of this great tribe within this epic nation supposed to come about through prostitution? Was the royal line and the messianic destiny supposed to be set in motion through incest? The answer to both of these questions seems to be a resounding yes. This was the way it had to happen. There was no other way it could come to be. The first two sons had to die and be removed from the course of events. It was Tamar who pushed things in the direction they had to go, but who knows if this was her intent. Yehuda played his unwitting part and certainly gets credit for being the founder of so much that would happen in Israelite and Jewish destiny. But he certainly had no intention of this when he solicited that prostitute. Sometimes this is the way things are. We have classic expressions for these unexpected outcomes. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. There is a famous Yiddish expression, man plans and God laughs. Whether it was Joseph's and his dreams and dream interpretations, his brothers and their plans to nix Joseph's dreams, or Judah and Tamar and their conflicting and puzzling acts of prostitution and incest, things played out according to some divine plan that little to nothing to do with what the protagonists had in mind. It's the same with every one of us. We may not have God running the show as directly behind the scenes in our lives, but we certainly can testify that life takes unexpected turns despite our best efforts to steer it in a specific direction. The really interesting thing about all this is that even though we may not have all that much power over the results, and they may not match our intentions, they still wouldn't have happened if we didn't do whatever it is that we did. We do have the power to make things move in this world, but we have to realize that we are not the only players in the game. Shabbat Shalom.